From the Oklahoman newsroom, it's time for the Red Zone, our weekly extended look at Oklahoma football. I'm Jenny Carlson here in studio with fellow columnist Barry Trammell, OU beat writer Joe Masato. Guys, it's Heisman week. The actual games are over for a minute, but obviously a lot still going on with the Sooners, primarily Kyler Murray. There will also be the awards ceremony in Atlanta on Thursday night. He's up for a couple awards. But Joe, let's talk about the Heisman. I don't think anybody was surprised that that Kyler Murray was selected a finalist, but what's the sense right now about his chances for actually winning this thing on Saturday night?
Well, the odds say a little better than 50-50 for Kyler Murray, and that's probably close to what it is. I mean, I don't think anyone would be surprised if it's Tua. I don't think people would be surprised if it was Kyler. Obviously, people here would love to see Kyler win the award, and the whole race is just fascinating because Tua, we had that mental image of him winning the national title last year, filling in for Jalen Hurts, and ever since then, he's been the Heisman frontrunner. That changed on Saturday, and Kyler might have the lead, and we'll soon find out.
Yeah, I don't think anybody ever thought that Saturday could go in the Sooners' favor and also go in Kyler's favor, Barry, but it actually worked out almost unimaginably well for this team.
Yeah, well, it was a close to perfect day, even to the point of how OU beat Texas and how Alabama beat Georgia. You just wanted those two things to happen, but the scripts went such that it was great. There seemed to be very little way for Alabama to win and impede Tua's Heisman campaign, but that's what happened. Now, the whole nation believes Kyler's going to win it. I'm still a little skeptical. I just have a hard time believing Kyler can make up that much room in one weekend, but maybe he can. It'd be a great thing. I know this. We saw Alabama without Tua. Mm-hmm. They look pretty dang good. Anybody want to watch the Sooners without Kyler Murray? It's not going to look that good. So maybe that's what the voters are thinking.
Yeah, but we heard all preseason about how much Kyler Murray and Austin Kendall were locked in a battle. Maybe Austin Kendall's better than we ever knew.
Austin Kendall for Heisman 2019. Start it right now. Right now.
Maybe that's where we're headed. I don't know. Joe, the whole idea of this lead that Tua Tagovailoa set out on the field.
Did you say his name correctly?
I think I did.
Say it again.
You got it.
Tagovailoa. There's a hidden N in there.
It's Tonga?
Tagovailoa.
Hidden N.
Say it again.
I just got Tagovailoa figured out, and then I figured out that was wrong.
It's Tonga.
It's Tagovailoa, everybody. I think.
That's like the OSU had a defensive tackle. Was it Tia Tonga?
Yeah, Tongatea.
Tongatea.
Yeah.
Well, then forget about it.
He's off the Heisman ballot. But Joe, this question of the lead that Tua had, and then early voting. The Heisman is all electronic voting at this point. But people can actually go vote before the games are over. That you hate to think that people are doing that, but they do, and a fairly large percentage, I think, too.
Yeah, from what we were hearing, it was a little down this year with what it's been in the past, but still
Good.
around 10 to 12%, I think is what they were saying, which is 10 to 12% of the vote that Kyler Murray has lost for the most part, you would think, if people filled out their ballots before this week. So that could be the difference. If it's close, for the other 90% and you add that in, I mean, it could give Tua the edge.
Yeah, it's going to be a very close vote. Barry, if we see another OU quarterback on the heels of Baker Mayfield win the Heisman's not the be-all, end-all, but still, the historical nature of that back-to-back, put it in context for us.
Well, here's a good marketing campaign for the Sooners. We win so many Heisman trophies, we can't get the statues up in time. If Kyler Murray wins Saturday night, they're two statues behind. They haven't even got Baker's up yet. So it's remarkable to have that kind of quarterbacking quality, especially back-to-back. But you look at the 2000s in the Bob Stoops, Lincoln Riley era, it's going to be 5 Heisman quarterbacks, either first or second.
Yeah.
I mean, that's crazy. And I'm not talking about Baker being in the top 4 3 times. It's 5 different guys. So it's become quarterback U.
Yeah.
Oklahoma has become quarterback U. Life was a little more easy going when it was defensive tackle U. Nobody was scoring 48 points a Saturday. But, it sure is exciting. And, we sat there thinking, we'll never see another quarterback like Baker Mayfield, as productive, as exciting. It took them about 9 months to find another one who's just as productive, even more exciting.
Yeah.
So I don't know what Lincoln Riley's got up his sleeve next, but Austin Kendall, the pressure's on you.
Well, it's funny you say that because I was heading home a couple weekends ago with the OSU guys after OSU played at TCU. We were listening to some Sunday morning sports talk, and somebody brought up the fact that, they were talking about Kyler Murray and, well, there's going to be a drop-off. The Sooners can't replicate this. And I thought, hold up. A year ago, everybody was saying there's no way that even this 5-star guy who never lost a game in high school, Joe, no way he can come and be Baker Mayfield. And it surprised everybody. Come on, I wrote a column earlier this week saying I was a doubter, but we all didn't. I mean, who thought he was going to be better than Baker Murray Baker Mayfield and changing his name now so much? I mean, it's been really remarkable what Kyler Murray has done.
Yeah, I don't think anyone really expected this. It's easy for them to say on the outside how confident they are in him, how he might be the next, Baker Mayfield type. But they did kind of, I don't know if they tricked us into thinking the race was as close as they said it was. If it is, Austin Kendall might be the third best quarterback in the country. But, they've got a system in place, and it's more than just they're obviously more than just system quarterbacks. But what Lincoln Riley runs, Baker Mayfield, Kyler Murray have just excelled in that. They've got Spencer Rattler, arguably the number one dual threat quarterback coming in. They're just loaded at that position. They're finding the right guys. And, Kyler Murray was a little bit of luck. They miss out on him on the original recruitment, goes to A&M, didn't have a great relationship with Josh Heupel. Lincoln Riley comes in, and that seals the deal for him.
It's interesting to me, too, Barry, when you think about recruiting quarterbacks into this system, when you've got a defense that's as deficient as the Oklahoma defense has been and, has been for now several years. It's just kind of an interesting thing that quarterbacks know when they come here, they're going to have to perform at a very high level. And yet Lincoln Riley continues to convince guys, and as Joe mentioned, great players to come here. I guess maybe more opportunities. I mean, the defense is going to give you a bunch of possessions. Maybe you just say, hey, bring on the challenge.
Well, to me, the current climate of Oklahoma football just couldn't get any better for recruiting offensive players. Look at what we do. Look, we got a coach that the NFL loves. We got an offensive line that's world class, up to the Joe Moore Award. We got these receivers. We got these running backs. Just come and it's the land of milk and honey. So I don't think recruiting quarterbacks is going to be a problem for Oklahoma in the near future. The truth is, the biggest problem is deciding which one to take, because you're only going to take one a year in most years. You're going to have the pick of the litter most of the time. Sometimes you can miss. Schools, Oklahoma has done it. You miss on quarterbacks, so you don't want to do that. But man, it's a great place to be if you're recruiting offense. How you recruit defensive players, I got no help for you.
And could Lincoln Riley swing over and start helping? I don't know. All right, guys, let's talk about the game. It's way out in the distance. Obviously, December 29th, we've got a lot of time to digest this one. It's interesting that this is the matchup spot, Joe, because the way the protocol works for the selection committee, you don't want to send the top seed to a geographic site that disadvantages them. Obviously, you would think Dallas would be a site that would fit with Oklahoma being so close. But we were hearing talk at the Big 12 title game that Alabama might actually like the Cotton Bowl. It sounds like maybe didn't come to fruition.
Yeah, it didn't happen, and maybe it would have happened if their opponent would have been anyone other than Oklahoma, because the distances are pretty close, but it's about 2.5 hours. Tuscaloosa is closer to Dallas than it is Miami. Nick Saban's never lost in Jerry World, so maybe he wanted to go down there again. But playing Oklahoma changed things, but I was sort of under the impression that, the top seed had preference to where they were going to go. But on Nick Saban's conference call just after the matchup was announced, he said no one from the playoff ever contacted Alabama or him. They didn't have any input. That's where the committee put them, and maybe that's because OU's proximity to Dallas.
Yeah, I have to think that changed the equation because, some of the stuff we were hearing, it fits that Saban would like it. Has not lost there. Also, you practice where you play, and it's all climate controlled. In Miami, we know anything can happen, and you don't practice where you play. So the fact that this matchup is in Miami, Barry, obviously Sooner fans would have loved to go to Dallas. And yet at the same time, you got to think Alabama fans were buying up tickets down there. It might not have been that easy for Crimson and Cream to get Crimson Tide tickets.
Well, I mean, you look at the Big 12 title game.
Yeah.
I mean, there were more Texas fans than OU fans there because of, they made arrangements earlier. So, yeah, it would have been great, but the Sooners are a 4th seed, so you got to play wherever they put you. The key to me is how does OU reverse this Miami misfortune? They beat Florida State there 18 years ago to win the national title, and since then they have had no luck in Miami. They lose to Southern Cal there. They lose to Florida there, both national title games. They lose at Miami U in 09 when Sam Bradford was hurt, and then in 15 in the semifinals they lose to Clemson. So 4-game losing streak in Miami. They definitely need to turn it around.
Obviously one of the things that will be important to that is having all the bullets in your gun, and Marquise Brown is a pretty big one for the Sooners, Joe. I know we haven't really had a lot of access, but his availability, how much does that change things for Oklahoma? Let's say he's not available. Let's say whatever that foot ankle injury he suffered in the Big 12 title game keeps him out.
Well, I think it changes things quite a bit because he is their most dynamic guy on the outside. With as good as CeeDee Lamb is, Marquise Brown is their top receiver, and production-wise, it's not particularly close. Now he had a nagging injury kind of at the midseason point, his ankle. Don't exactly know what this injury is, if he re-aggravated the same thing or if it's totally different. But, Lincoln Riley said after the game, we can win ball games without Marquise Brown because they did it for the most part on Saturday. They have so many weapons on the outside, but you're taking away the best weapon and the weapon that's going to give Alabama the most trouble. So I think that's just going to be a story we're going to have to follow throughout the bowl season and might not have much clarity on it until the game.
Well, and we may be in the same boat with Tua, Barry, because
what's his last name?
Tagovailoa. But he's like LeBron. There's no other Tuas out there, so let's just call him Tua. Just forget the last name.
Well, I'm going to call him Tua. I promise you. I don't care how many's out there. I'm going to call him Tua. But
well, when you think about those two injuries, though, Marquise Brown and Tua Tagovailoa, Joe laid out the impact of not having Marquise Brown, how significant that is for the Sooners. You hate to even think that might be a more significant injury for the Sooners than losing Tua would be for Alabama, but we've seen what Jalen Hurts can do. I mean, we know that the machinery is there. Is Tua potentially a bigger loss than Marquise Brown for the Sooners, or do you see it almost as a wash?
I've actually asked this question. Is OU better off if both play or if both miss the game? And I've gotten different answers from people who follow the Sooners. I would tend to think the Sooners would probably like their chances better if Tua didn't play. This is an Oklahoma defense that gets carved up no matter what. If somebody ran the single wing, it would carve up the Sooners. But the deep ball and the passing game is really where it hurts them. And Tua can clearly do that better than Jalen Hurts. Now, against Georgia, Jalen Hurts was way better. I don't know if that was a health thing. I don't know if that was just Cinderella springing to life. I don't know what it was. But if Tua doesn't play against the Sooners, my hope for the Oklahoma defense, at least standing on its feet, goes way up.
Guys, we've talked about one question that we can't answer right here. Let's talk about another, that being any coaching changes. And this is a really interesting sort of sub-story to this whole matchup. And, Joe, it probably starts with Alabama and their defensive coordinator, a guy that Lincoln Riley would really like to have as his defensive coordinator. This really is an interesting situation.
Yeah, if Pete Golding is the guy Lincoln Riley wants as his next defensive coordinator, even if he wants an interview with him, that's all going to be put on hold. Nick Saban's not going to let Lincoln Riley talk to his defensive coordinator before this matchup. So, that's just going to be really interesting to follow. Pete Golding was at UTSA. He's in his first year at Alabama. It's a co-defensive coordinator type thing, so it's not like, if you're wondering why would Alabama's coordinator leave for Oklahoma, it'd be a promotion and that he'd be the guy at OU. He's a younger guy, and I think that's the direction they sort of want to trend as far as having a Lincoln Riley type guy, but on the defensive end. But, the December 19th date is one to remember because that's when the early signing period begins. It's really not even the early signing period with the way we saw it last year because almost everybody signed during that time. And if you want your defensive commits to know who the next defensive coordinator is going to be, if they want Pete Golding, they're not going to know that at that time.
Well, and that's that guy might just be totally out of the mix because of this matchup, but he's not the only guy that could be on the move, Barry. We've heard Shane Beamer's name thrown out there as a possible head coaching candidate at some places. This always happens. I mean, coaches are on the move, but do you anticipate any of these guys moving, and who could be maybe most impactful of those assistants at Oklahoma if one of them would move?
Well, I don't think anybody's going to move before the Orange Bowl. I think it seems like most of the jobs are starting to fill up. I do think there's going to be coaching changes on the staff, but not of their own volition. I mean, I think we're going to see more defensive coaches depart, other than just Mike Stoops after a performance like this season. But I don't think the Sooners will be impacted by somebody coming. I don't think anybody's coming and hiring away Cale Gundy. I don't think anybody's coming and getting Shane Beamer. Just circumstances being what they are, they both. Some are too young or maybe just not the right fit. Somebody like Cale is in such a good spot and making so much money that he's not going to go be the coach at Texas State. So I tend to think the coaching staff will remain intact going into the Orange Bowl. Then afterwards, or either that or after the championship game, I think you will see more changes.
Well, and Joe, with a new defensive coordinator, you always want to allow them to at least bring some assistance with them. I've seen Calvin Thibodeau out on the recruiting trail, pictures posted from different places. Really haven't seen much of the other defensive assistants, Tim Kish, Kerry Cooks. Is that a sign of anything in your mind?
I mean, it might be. I think they're still going to recruit up until that point.
Yeah.
Even if they don't know their futures, especially because that's just what they have to do. But, I think that is one thing to look at is, okay, what guys are being recruited by what assistant coaches, especially beyond this class, because, if you're only recruiting 2019 guys, that may be a sign. So, and if we're talking about bringing in a new defensive coordinator after the bowl game, that would sort of line up as far as, okay, every coach right now remains on staff through the bowl. A new D coordinator comes in and brings in his own guys.
All right, lots of questions still out there. We'll continue to follow all these storylines and much more. Obviously, a lot of focus this week on the Heisman, though. That ceremony is 7 o'clock on Saturday night. Winners usually announced right before the 8 o'clock hour. That's on ESPN. So be sure to stay with the best coverage team anywhere at newsok.com and every day in the Oklahoman.